Good morning, it's 11:02 a.m. Eastern Time, October 29th, Tuesday. This is Richard Pawson, and this is the climate update. We do this monthly, sometimes it's only bi-monthly. And we look at cycles, what our cyclical model is saying about climate. So we're primarily interested in long term. We don't care about the day-to-day weather. The weathermen do a fine job of forecasting that. Sometimes I think I do a better job with the cycles, forecasting, say, what's going to happen over several months or years or something like that, or for the year. It's not always the case, but I think it's a valid research and worthy research. First, let me give you a little bit of background of what's going on now in the news of weather, climate. There's a suggestion that for the month of November, the southeast U.S. and a strip going from southeast to northwest will be cooler than normal. And then moving towards the southwest, you'll see it warmer than normal to much warmer than normal when you get right down in the southwest corner. Then from that cooler than normal strip, say beginning around North Carolina, heading up to Chicago, Illinois, it can be much cooler than normal for November, and that can spill up into New York. The interesting thing is Maine and Vermont and Hampshire is showing as warmer than normal. Okay, now there's also some discussion that some of the heavy and early snows seen in Siberia, Russia, are a clue that places like New York City could see a snowier and perhaps colder or more volatile, more wintry kind of winter. So big debate on that. Some people are arguing, no, it's really not the relationship you think, and others saying, yes, there's a relationship. But currently it kind of favors, at least the news cycle, favors to consider a more extreme winter relative to what's going on in Russia. And then this week we saw that in the UK, and I think over in Belgium and France, they saw extremely high winds, extreme serious storms, flooding on the coastline. The volatility is still here, folks. Now let me give you some background of my supercycles of climate, which does relate to the research of Raymond Wheeler, who conducted research on all sorts of things related to climate. He felt like there's even cycles in philosophy, religion, politics, cycles in the stock market, business, commodities, real estate, could all be related to cycles of climate. He called it the affairs of man relating to climate, And then, of course, he studied climate and made forecasts for wetter or drier periods of time, cold or warmer periods of time. And someone wrote a book about him, and by the early 1980s, they assumed he had been right 65 to 85% of the time for his forecast from 1950s to 1980s. And I looked up the research, and he made forecasts, I think, all the way to the 2060s or something like that. And he was calling for global warming. And he called it correctly, and he called for a major change in conservatism and how we do business and this and that in 1980 and 2000. And boy, if that doesn't fit, I mean, that's got to be an incredible call. But he did warn there would be a cooling period in the 2010s. I think he said it could spill over in the 2020s, but he also said in the 2020s you should see things warm right up again, that he was saying the larger climate cycles are warm right into the 2030s, maybe 2040s. He said by 2060s we should see cool and wet again, and things should get back to normal a little better. Now, I have a similar model. I look at that 1,000-year cycles, which he seemed to be fascinated, 1,000 on down to short-term cycles. He did study cycles up to millions of years, I guess, or something. But my model goes up to 100,000. And my model is saying a 100,000-year cycle top can occur in the 2030s, or thereabouts. And it breaks all the way down to the 1,000-year cycle, and it does seem in line with Raymond Wheeler's research. And it does seem that it can top out in the 2030s. So global warming till then, and I do not believe we've seen the hottest. However, even I've been stating here in the last few years, it is time for a 9-year cycle to trend down, meaning cooler, and so we could get a bit of relief. But what I don't know is, will it work? It may not even work because of these super cycles so intense, going into such an important top, that it could just cancel the 9-year cycle. In addition, it may just limit it, so we really don't see as cooling, it's just a little less warm. But I can see how we could just get slammed side ahead of a serious cooling time, more serious winters, not so warm summer, and only to later see it recover to even still warmer relative to these larger global warming trends. So at any rate, using these cycles, I made a forecast several years ago that sometime in the late 2000s to early 2000s, eventually we nailed it as 2008 to 2014, we would see a 27-year cycle that would knock down precipitation. Now this is a chart of the U.S. summer months, June to August. That's how meteorologists, climatologists use it. They don't start it like June 21st. They just use the months. And I just went to the government site to update the summer of 2013. And I ran into a problem that they've changed their site. They make it more user-friendly in terms of bringing out your own data. But the problem is it kind of threw me off, and I couldn't find my central U.S. region. So I may have to just pick a state because I don't have the time and resources to do many states. But I was following a region they called the Central Region, which was pretty much the Corn Belt, okay? And now I may have to pick an individual state. So I didn't update those today, okay? But the forecast worked very well, and but I do need to study what went on in the Corn Belt here for 2013. But I was able to update the summer precipitation and temperature. At any rate, look at this. We were calling for a top. There was a top for a 27-year cycle back in 1991, meaning wet. This is a precipitation line chart. And then it was a 9-year cycle, wet, okay? And now it's due for a 9-year cycle top, okay? So it was time to recover and be wet again. It will pull back, and then it's going to be still wetter probably sometime next decade, and then it's going to pull back, okay? And we're probably going to see it very dry by the 2030s. We know this because of the larger 27-year cycle I'm tracing out now, and that builds into larger 54-year cycles that build into larger 100-year, which I called, and maybe even 216-year cycles like what we use in the markets and economy. And it's suggesting we can have a significant drought for the U.S., for the world really, by the time we get to the 2030s. But the 27-year cycle was due 2008 to 2014, and lo and behold, 2012, actually it was 2011 for the U.S., 2012 for the Corn Belt, it had a slam dunk. We had a drought. And notice it came back to a trend line, or somewhat of a trend line, of other extremes, other cyclical performance. Then it was time to recover, and I said it would only recover somewhat. Well, we need to study the Corn Belt because I don't think it recovered as well as what the U.S. chart shows. I'm rather stunned a little bit, well, not stunned, but a bit surprised how well it really did recover. Bam, okay? It was wet, okay? So we're recovering. We've seen the cyclical drought, and now we're on to some cyclical high of being wet. So we might be back to normal now into next decade, and then there's going to be some kind of slam dunk again, some kind of serious drought going into the 2030s. Now, if we look at just 9-year cycles by themselves can still cause serious crop problems, even as serious as 27-year cycles, but it will be unlikely to cause like the most extreme 27-year cycle. So eventually we're going to get another setback, and I say before this decade's over, we're going to see that 9-year cycle bottom come in and precipitation's coming down, and we're going to see another crop problem before the end of this decade. And the prices of cycles of the cycles of price for many of the commodities like the grains show a bull market coming and a new record high coming later this decade. So for the moment, however, this is wet. And I just want to warn you, a 3-year cycle can step in here now and pull this down for 2014. I think risks to crops are higher for 2014 than they were in 2013, but they should not be as high as they were in 2012 and 11 and 10 when we saw those crop problems and saw the U.S. drought and the Corn Belt drought or whatnot. So I think we're going to see a little pullback in precipitation next year, but I don't know how well we can truly forecast that because the 3 to 4 year cycle doesn't work quite as well as it does for prices. Works about 80% of the time, so you never know. Maybe precipitation's up for the next 5 years or something. You're going to combine 2 3-year cycles. But I just want to warn you, it is time to actually pull that down a little bit for a 3-year cycle. Okay? Then they're probably going to snap it back up for another 3-year cycle top. Then we're going to start that larger 9-year cycle decline later this decade. But interesting how it worked. And notice, not only did the precipitation decline stop at this line, but notice how we drew a line back here from some important cycles. and it pulled back to meet that as well. And notice when you use a regression trend channel or standard, I forget, it might be standard deviation. Okay, it was just a little bit below that and snapped back up. So a nice recovery for precipitation. Now I also want to add that I keep a Chicago precipitation and temperature index, not the raw data, just look at an index. And the index is all set up such that 2014 can be a down year for precipitation. And it could be rather important. We could be putting in a 9-year cycle. So the Corn Belt may, in my opinion, the last 10 years, the Corn Belt's been doing something different in the U.S. anyways. For many years, it did not get on board the global warming. Now it could be get on the board. Now it's probably on board of the global warming. But I'm a little bit suspicious. We could actually have dryness in the Corn Belt for the next 5 years. So it could, in fact, still do something different than the U.S. here. And we could even see a bit more crop problem there than we might normally expect. So we'll be watching that, something different. Okay, this is the U.S. summer temperature. Again, for June, July, August total. Okay, it would be an average, likely. We were concerned of a 9-year cycle top. And look, it topped in 2011. It was down for 2012, and it was down for 2013. It's cooling off for the U.S. And I was warning you, we're due for a 9-year cycle decline. Now, this 9-year cycle can bottom fairly soon, so things can be warming up already by late this decade, but unfortunately, there's still a fair amount of time. This cycle could stay down to 2016, 2017, and keep us at, say, normal temperatures is what I think will occur. But the point is, least off the recent highs, which means it's in a cooling trend, even though on balance, it may just be normal temperatures. So don't be surprised that we see the anti-global warming people have some more evidence here in the next few years. Things can cool off a bit. We want to be cautious of listening to them. They're not going to be right. The bigger trend is still warmer to much warmer going into the 2030s. And I want to warn you, crop-wise, even the cool periods can cause more serious crops. If we want to look at just the volatility of weather and don't debate if it's global warming or global cooling or nothing at all, at least volatility-wise, we had it too easy the last 20 or 30 years. The next 20, 30 years, weather will be more volatile and we will see more damage from weather. And then, of course, the population is growing, so we have more value of everything that we own here. So there's going to be even greater dollar damage than ever before. Thank you.